Welcome to the Cross Council Podcast. Wow, look at that. I even just cursed
If you're
myself.
gonna screw up the recording, do it in the first 5 seconds.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Welcome to the Cross Council Podcast. We believe you have been created in God's image. However, as in all of us, the likeness of Christ has been diminished and needs to be restored by the experiential love and truth of Jesus. My name is Steve Freitag. I'm a former pastor and have been a part of Cross Council for over 25 years, facilitating more than 10,000 ministry sessions. In this podcast, we aim to share helpful insights and inspiring testimonies to support you on your journey. You don't need to be a spiritual giant to receive ministry with us. Just a courageous heart, open and willing to God's refining fire. Those who dive into our melt process find immediate help and lasting hope. This is Changing Generations. We've heard from many of you who have been blessed by our podcast and ministry. If you find value in what we do, we invite you to visit our website at crosscouncil.com, and you can support us, including this podcast, with a special financial gift, or even more importantly, consider becoming a monthly supporter to sustain our ministry and keep these podcasts coming. Your support makes a lasting impact now and in generations to come, both here in the States and in many places all over the world. Before we dive into today's episode, I have a quick announcement that's both time and location sensitive. If you're listening after Saturday, November 9th, or if you're not near Madison, feel free to skip ahead. But if you're in the area and listening in time, we'd love to see you at our chili cook-off fundraiser. It's happening this Saturday, November 9th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Living Water Church in Sun Prairie. It's open to anyone. However, this is also a competition for those who choose to enter. As of Tuesday, we already have a dozen chilies entered, but we're open to a few more entries. For more information about the event and to sign up for the competition, visit our website under the Events tab. The cost to taste and vote on a winner is $10 with kids under 18 free. There will also be plenty of other drawings and free giveaways throughout the evening. Now, here's a sneak peek at some amazing auction items up for grabs. Beginning with what we'll do at the end of the night, we'll have a live auction for 2 items. The first is for Madison's legendary pontoon porch. Enjoy an unforgettable day with friends on Lake Monona with an $1,100 gift certificate for this floating log cabin that can hold up to 30 people, making it the perfect group outing. The second live auction item is a scenic flight over Wisconsin. Enjoy breathtaking views and fascinating commentary from former fighter pilot Bruce Fisher. Up to 3 people can join this unique flight experience. Make sure to check out the video I linked to on our events page for a good look at his Stinson Voyager. And here are a few of our top silent auction items. A night at Madison's Edgewater Hotel, Badger men's hockey tickets for December 7th, and a color and style analysis for 2 from House of Color, valued at $550. Gentlemen, can I say Christmas present? Now on to today's episode. With that long commercial, I'll just say this. AJ and I had an interesting conversation about facing what we need to face, not letting our subconscious trick us into thinking we're all good, and what we can do to avoid disillusionment. AJ, you're alone.
I am. Yeah, no babysitter today, so Hillary is on Levi duty. They're downstairs hanging out, and we're for anybody watching online, we've changed avenues. Instead of driving up to Onalaska to record at the house, we just pulled the equipment back home and we're in the bedroom. Hillary was nice enough to make the bed for our YouTube audience so that I'm presentable. So shout out to Hillary.
Don't you make the bed every day?
Clean your bloody room. No, I don't. I should. I'm not a very good lobster, if anybody will get that joke.
Yeah, they can look it up.
Oh.
That's fine. What else is going on?
Okay. All right. The screen is blacking out. That's what's going on.
Huh.
No, it's Friday. It's a quiet day at the factory today. Thankfully, I was able to get out by like 11:30, so it was like a very, very half day today. So not a lot of overtime going on, and things were quiet, and I snuck out early and got to meet my niece. That's the big news.
Mm-hmm.
My wife's brother and his wife had their first little girl. Yeah, no, the name's on Facebook. So Esther, they have a little girl named Esther. So it's disclosed, some people hide their name for a while, but yeah, they got a beautiful little girl named Esther, and she was asleep the whole time that I was there, but she's just a little itty bitty one, and Levi was fascinated as long as he could look at her, and it was really sweet.
I just went through Esther in the Bible in a Year podcast. It's a Catholic podcast that I actually listen to. And so they actually have additional chapters in Esther.
Oh,
I did not know
that's
that.
interesting.
Yeah.
I
So,
figured there's some interesting history to the canon there because
mhm.
isn't it, at least in Protestant copies, isn't it the only book in the Bible where God is not mentioned by name?
That's, yeah, listening today, God is certainly mentioned in the chapters that were read in the Catholic podcast. So
Mm,
that's what kind of threw me off.
that'd
I'm
be a
like,
good rabbit
wow,
hole to go down to see why they have chapters that
yeah,
we don't. It's interesting. Hmm.
yeah, you look that up. Why does the non-Catholic version of the Bible in Esther not have God, but the Catholic version does?
Hmm. Hmm.
We could look that up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a different podcast.
So here on the podcast, we're constantly trying to do things that inspire you, to educate you. We use our level one, our level two, even backing up to the orientation to educate people on the melt process. And there's plenty of material out there. And that always seeps into what we're doing here. But hopefully, by listening to this podcast, you get to know us a little bit better. Um, I don't think AJ would consider himself an expert in the melt process because it's been since maybe high school or so since you taken a class. You've just kind of lived in the environment of two parents that have begun to deal with their stuff, and hopefully for the last 25 years or so been doing that. So with what AJ brings and what Hillary brings too, it's also a different generation, and it's experiential and some of the things that they have discovered through this, but they're also pretty culturally in tune. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today, because I want to, as long as this conversation goes, whether it's one, two, three, or four podcasts, talking about, if we could call it, half measures. Half measures are kind of uh, dangerous, I guess, because you're not really dealing with the full problem. I think when somebody gets an infection, and AJ, correct me if you know any better, but one of the reasons why the doctors want you to have the full run of the antibiotics, and we're not going to talk much about antibiotics right here, other than just the idea that here's the bottle, take the whole bottle, because if you don't take the whole bottle, it actually is worse. If you let that thing just have the antibiotics touch it a little bit and then you don't completely deal with it, it might come back even worse. So that's above my pay grade.
Yeah, that's about what I would say as a layperson with uh layperson, medical expertise
Mm-hmm.
would be that yeah, they want you to take the whole thing so that it's completely eradicated and doesn't come back around immune to the antibiotic.
So there's this bent, I think, in our culture. Again, we've talked a lot about the left brain, the right brain. The left brain is the much safer side of the brain. It's the informational side. It's the part of the mind that analyzes things. It's the part of the mind that keeps information. Not that there's not crossover. It's just an oversimplistic way of putting it. But we think that if, as long as we get information, we got it. People come, they might even listen to this podcast never having experienced the melt process, never getting a session at cross council and thinking, okay, I got a handle on it. That's just not the case. Or even going to an orientation. There's something that happens in the subconscious that's like, okay, you've gone far enough. The subconscious tricks ourselves into thinking that we're doing better than we really are. That's not to throw shame out at anybody. It's just a reality of the subconscious. Whether you're a Christ follower or not, the subconscious is constantly on the lookout for danger. And as long as you get a little bit of information, you think you're a little bit smarter, which you might be, the subconscious loves to say, you got it. Okay. So people, they expose themselves a little bit to the idea of the melt process, transformational prayer. They might do a little reading. They might watch some videos and go, okay, I've got a handle on it. But then they might even come for a session. And one of the things that Jenny does a really good job at is now in the intro calls, really, really, really making it clear to people that this isn't a one and done. This isn't even a 2, 3, 4 done. It's not even a 5. It's we're done when we die. And so, sorry, somebody just yanked on my door. Somebody, somebody trying to hand out flyers. So anyway, moving right along. So this is this constant process of getting better. It's becoming more and more transformed by the renewing of our mind, which is a lifelong process. And when we don't deal with the root causes of things, these deep-seated emotional wounds or lie-based thinking, these false beliefs, they're left unaddressed. Uh, I think wherever God's light goes, the darkness can't overcome it. So it's not like I would say that healing is temporary when it comes to certain things, but it just doesn't go as deep as it can. So, and people can walk out of this place or even on an online session and be really encouraged, and that's great, but it doesn't mean that they're done. So there might be progress, but there's not nearly the amount of progress that could happen. And so there's underlying issues that begin to get exposed, and then they think, oh, that cross counsel thing, that really didn't work. In reality, what might be happening is now that you've dealt with maybe one narrow layer of things, more gets exposed. So what happens is we ultimately don't get to all the root causes. And I still think in my personal life, I'm still trying to get to root causes in my life. I've gotten to many, but I think there's more. So it's just this constant, not we often talk about this, just the idea that we want to be self-aware but not self-absorbed. Okay. Because
Hmm.
this is about us growing in our relationship with Christ. It's about coming into the people that we've been created to be. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to ignore those places where we get exposed. A lot of people wonder, where do I start? And so we talk about, okay, where have you felt less than peaceful? And when they actually cooperate with the process, that makes a big difference. Otherwise, what happens is we repeat these dysfunctional behaviors, these relationships in our lives, all these things that need to be well ordered in our life don't get well ordered. And I don't mean in a control sense. I mean in the sense of the logos, bringing order to those things that have been chaotic. And boy, off the top of my head, just thinking about what are all the different, and please add to the different things in our lives. So there's probably things in our lives that need to be ordered. Of course, our relationship with God, but then there's the relationship with our family, the relationship that we have with coworkers, the relationship we have with friends, the relationship we have with people at church, our finances, our food, lots of different things. Are there other things that you think about when we think about having to order things?
So orderly relationship with your family, what you earn, with what you do with what you earn, with your food, church, your relationships. Yeah, I would say romantically, you need to have a proper understanding of the context that you're in and not be responding or acting out of an emotional wound. I would say that that
Mhm.
needs to be an um, orderly relationship, and it's going to be different in different stages of life, right? But so it's going to have different
Right.
context. But that would be, I don't know that I would add much else, right? Your workplace
Okay.
needs to be a good relationship with your work and your home and all of that.
Mhm. Right. We can have one area of our life fairly well ordered, but then there's another area that isn't. And again, this isn't about control. This is getting to a
Right.
place where we're strong, steady, sturdy, and secure. And even if there's chaos around us, that we're not caught up in the tornado. We're not caught up in the whirlwind. We're not caught up in the storm, but we can be in the eye of the storm. And
Right.
that's easy.
There aren't enough milk processes to be had that will suddenly cause the rest of your family to behave in a different way.
Right.
Right.
So
It's
right.
outside of your reach,
That
but we
happens
can control how we
quite a bit.
respond.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in helping people get to some of their pain. Okay, so if that person doesn't change, how does that feel to think that that person won't change? God
Right.
forbid we say that, it would be wonderful if that person got some stuff in their life more in order. But if they
Mhm.
don't, if your roommate, if your spouse, if your friend, if your parents, if your kids don't get things in order, where does that leave your heart?
Right.
Because then that trips us up, and we we just make really bad decisions in that. We operate out of our pain and coping mechanisms, and we also live in this sense of denial or blame shifting. We don't see things for the way they are. One of my long-lasting prayers is, Lord, show me the way things are, not the way I think things are. I was listening
Mm.
to a podcast, and this is just an overgeneralization, but he was talking about how 20% of people can be convinced of almost anything. If you've got somebody who's charismatic, there's 20% of our culture that can be convinced of almost anything, which probably leads into a little bit about what we'll talk about later. There's 10% that pretty much put their arm out. They stiff arm just about everything. They don't believe they don't believe anything. And then there's 70% of us that probably have some sense of reason. But it's so interesting that I think that it's the outliers, it's the fringe that drives so much of our culture. And that's probably, again, another podcast. Any
Hmm.
thoughts before I move on?
The numbers sound right to me. Yeah, that 10% of people wouldn't believe anything, and 20% of people would believe anything. Sure.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So we want people to grow, and I think the half measures aren't just limited to what we talk about in our process. We want people to fully engage in a transformational friendship with God. That used to be one of our taglines. And so it requires confronting really the deep pain in our life and the false, twisted beliefs that we carry that we're not always ready to take a look at. And when we jump over those processes, it can really stifle our growth and maturity, and it limits people's ability to fully experience God's love and His freedom and growth in Christ. And when we talk about freedom, it's not I just get to do whatever I want. It's being
Hmm.
free to do those things that we're called to. And one of my favorite phrases when people come back after a session or we're talking in between sessions is I find myself. Wow, I find myself not wanting to look at porn. I find myself not getting so angry about. I find myself not so anxious about. Those are really good markers when it comes to transformation.
They're
So,
surprised by their new nature.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So the half measures of people not fully engaging in the process because they might find some relief, and that's great. I love it when people leave a session going, that was awesome, but they're not done. I'm not done. So the relief they find, wonderful, but it doesn't mean, again, it comes back to the subconscious that just says, okay, well, good, you did that. Don't ever do that again. That was too hard. Even though a big part of
Right.
them, yeah, it's like, oh, that's good. So
Yeah,
so then,
returning to the memory is a painful experience. It's why even I, growing up in your house, put it well off as much as I could because I had experiences with Melt and returning to the memory of pain and fear, right? I mean,
mhm,
you need to, it's not the best analogy, but like you need to rip the band-aid off.
mhm,
It's never a joyful experience to have that first bit of pain, but then it's going to reap rewards untold
mhm,
if you actually get healing in that area. But your body and your brain have this resistance to pain, understandably so, and it's deep emotional pain. You don't want to return there. You don't,
mhm.
but there's a way through.
Right,
It's Christ,
right,
right?
right. Yeah, I agree because we don't want people walking away from what we do here with a sense of disillusionment. Oh, I went and saw that person from cross counsel. Well, maybe they got somewhere, maybe they didn't, maybe it's somewhere in between, but it's so much easier to blame shift instead
Hmm.
of own the things that we need to own. Because more and more problems are going to resurface. We don't really put the verse on our refrigerator that says that Jesus says the world is going to give you trouble, right? Trouble will come in this world,
Yeah.
right? And another thing that is really important for people to recognize is that it's probably a good idea to avoid the idea that I already dealt with this in most cases, unless it's really resolved. Just because you walk up to the edge of the cliff and you look down into that big canyon that's down there of garbage doesn't mean that you've dealt with everything that's down there. So it's a lot. There's a huge, it takes quite a bit of courage to walk to the edge of the cliff, but it takes even more courage to take a look at what's all down there. So
Yeah.
we're going to stop there for now and pick it up next week as we talk more about half measures. Thanks for joining us on the Cross Council podcast. We'll see you next time.